Welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. In the next 30 minutes, we'll reveal critical findings from our external DNS security audit of the healthcare industry. These insights expose significant vulnerabilities that are not just confined to healthcare, but are present across all industries, including your own. By understanding these risks, you'll gain valuable knowledge to strengthen your company's digital defenses and protect your customers. Whether you're in healthcare or another sector, this session promises to be eye-opening and actionable, helping you and your teams enhance your overall network security. Before we start, just like to introduce ourselves. I'm Peter Lamantia, CEO, and Sean here, our CTO. Before we get into it, Sean, it occurs to me that you ran a $2 billion company as the CTO. You've managed DNS, you've managed domains, you had your own DNS footprint. What do you think people forget about the DNS and some of the risks that are involved there?
Yeah, it feels like it's almost been my whole life dealing with these issues in various different capacities. The main thing is when you're in a large company like the last one I was in and a couple before that, especially ones that are doing a ton of M&A activity, is that domain names, DNS management, DNS security just turns into a sprawl. There's too many people involved. There's shadow organizations that get involved in registering domains and setting up DNS providers. And I've taken a run in former lives multiple times at trying to solve these problems, and you just never get through it. There's just too many systems, too many people, and there's always some other priority. But in the current environment, with the amount of ransomware attacks that are taking place, this just can't be ignored anymore. So I was very pleased to join Authentic Web, because we're really solving something that it keeps people awake at night in so many companies, and they just can't get their arms around it.
Well, obviously, good to have you. One of the things when we started this company, about 10 years ago now, I just recognize that these things are just really difficult to manage, and we want to provide a system that just made it simple for teams to manage their domains and DNS. And then we got into it, and a few years into it, we just recognized there were just so many security issues on the DNS. And I think what some people just forget, and it's difficult to communicate up the ladder, is that everything is fundamentally anchored on the DNS. If your DNS isn't working, then you've got issues. So that's great. So let's just go through this. So I'm going to introduce, and then Sean's going to share some of the results that we found from this healthcare audit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a little bit of background. Why are we thinking about healthcare? We'll talk about how the DNS gets exploited in almost all cyber compromises, because again, it is the foundation of your internet and everything depends upon it. We'll talk about some of the top DNS vulnerabilities. And we'll share some of these key insights of what we found in this benchmark report, and then share with you some practical steps that you can take to get this done. So just as a preamble, as a background, if you search the web talking about people and how they're managing DNS and some of the risks, you're going to find all sorts of really good quotes. So this one from this gentleman, Brian, he talks about, the domain name system. It just can't be understated how serious it is that, a malicious party can exploit DNS weakness, and essentially rerouting sensitive traffic, PHI or PII information. So, these guys the healthcare industry has become a top target. And then another one from the Enterprise Management Association that talked to different infrastructure folks, and they found that only about 31% think that they're confident in how they're managing their DNS infrastructure. And there's a couple ways to think about this. One is just the infrastructure itself. DNS hijacking is an issue. We also know about DNS tunneling, DNS amplification, or exfiltration. We're really talking about the infrastructure that you manage and how to lock that down. Why healthcare? So healthcare has now become the most attacked sector. So this stat came out from Black Kite that said that 35% of the attacks on the internet are in healthcare, which is amazing to me that eclipsed now finance and also government. The other piece that's important in healthcare particularly is that healthcare is subject to a number of different security frameworks. All of these frameworks require you to have IT controls and to have, auditability and monitoring in place. Obviously, healthcare has HIPAA, but if you're in finance and if you're in other industries, you're going to be subject to a number of these frameworks as well. And if you don't have your DNS covered, you're really not compliant with those frameworks. So I decided to sort of, talk about a few of those. So we highlighted 5 of them that are pretty consistent across all of these frameworks. So one of them is just about IT controls and user access. Who has access to these critical network assets and systems that you're running? All of these frameworks require this. Secondly, do you have logging? Do you have audits? Do you have audit management and auditability? So when it comes to DNS, do you know who changes a record on a zone file? Do you have monitoring to see if someone has put the company into a precarious position by setting something up that exposes you? And then do you have an ability to report on that about how you're doing? And then third, a change history. So if you've got multiple different registrars and multiple different DNS providers, and as Sean mentioned, specifically we've done a bunch of M&A and you haven't consolidated these things, you just don't know what those guys are doing in the bowels of the organization and what they might be setting up, and was something approved in some sort of a workflow. So you need that to be ensure that any of these changes that are happening are monitored, logged, and approved. The fourth one is just monitoring for vulnerabilities. So do you have some sort of a system that'll go out and identify where you've exposed the company to some sort of DNS attack vector? And then this other one around backups and recovery, and the applicability there related to the DNS is having secondary DNS in place so that if your primary DNS network goes down, the secondaries will pick those up, answer the queries, and you're still in business. And also just making sure that your zone files are backed up. If you lose a zone from a critical domain name and you can't restore that, that can just be a nightmare. So all of these 5 pieces are required across all these frameworks. So we thought that was pretty important just to remind people of. So, when we talk about the scale and severity of different types of DNS compromises, if you dig into this stuff, if you're paying attention, there's all sorts of issues around DNS hijacks or domains getting stolen or people sitting on connections on orphaned IP addresses or dangling CNAMEs. And it got so severe a couple of years ago that the Department of Homeland Security and the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK issued warnings to enterprise, say, listen, you need to get your DNS under control and ensure that you know what's happening and who's changing what. And as Sean mentioned, that's not so easy to do if you don't have the tools in place to be able to do it. So if you sort of summarize that, there are a whole bunch of risks here. So why are people exposed? Well, generally it's because there's really a lack of clear internal ownership, governance, and digital control systems. Again, if you have multiple different providers, DNS and registrar, you simply don't have one place, so you have a single pane of glass to be able to manage and monitor what's going on. And issues here can result in just catastrophe around an outage, brand impersonations, can result in phishing, malware, fraud, credential theft, or outages. So, these are serious issues that you certainly want to get yourself protected from. So, if looking at another way, we know that domains and DNS are vulnerable to compromise, or all these external threats that are out there all day long. The bad guys can all see your DNS. It's the public network. So they know what you've got and they know where you have weaknesses. And the causes are internal. This persists because it's just really hard for IT teams to get and keep control of this. And a lot of it's just manual workflow, lack of oversight, no real clear change management controls. You may have a ticketing system that says, hey, I need to do this. Yes, it's approved to do it. Someone did it. But do you actually know that they did what the ticket said? That these systems are typically disconnected from the control system you're using to manage your DNS. So this all sums up, say, okay, what are the top DNS and network vulnerabilities that we really need to worry about? And this is where I mentioned earlier, that, after a few years of doing this with clients and bringing over their domains and their DNS, we started to recognize these exposures. So we built this tool called DNS Inspector that's now giving us and our clients the ability to see where they have exposures and just very simply going in and cleaning those up. So the top ones are, insecure redirects. When I started in the internet in the late 1990s, we just set up redirects, and people do it all the time, just HTTP only to a destination that's secure, but the origin domain does not have a certificate on it. So this can result in a man in the middle, SSL stripping, or a session compromise where someone's eavesdropping on a connection to steal some sort of credential they're trying to get at. And man in the middle, they're going to forward them over to a fake site, and hopefully they might log in, and then they'll get a handle on some credentials. So insecure redirects are a big deal. We automate all that to be able to ensure that everything's encrypted end to end. Orphaned IPs, and I'll pop up this other one as well because they're kind of related, dangling CNAMEs. So over the years, there's been this attitude on DNS, set it and forget it. So that's exactly what guys have done. They've set up IP addresses to support a program, or they've set up a CNAME to support a program, and then that program ends, they shut down the web service. So now you've got a DNS record that's pointing to an IP you do not control, or a CNAME pointing to a web resource that you no longer control. So, bad actors can do what we're doing. They can go and inspect the DNS and find where you have these things and then take those over. And we've seen real examples of that, of people setting up porn sites, gambling sites, lookalike sites to try to steal and compromise companies and those companies' customers. So these are really important, but they're really hard to figure out which they are. Been able to provide some visibility there. Lame delegations are a big deal as well. So this is where you do not have a start of authority record set up on your domain name, right? So if you've got a domain, you've got a name server set up, if that's not properly delegated, then that domain or that DNS is open for someone else to set up an SOA record on that name server. So if you think of shared DNS services, if you've got a lame delegation, I can go in there and set that DNS up, set the SOA up on it, and now I've got control over that DNS and can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and you won't know until it's too late. SPF and DMARC coverage. So this has become so important in recent years, not just for mail deliverability that we saw recently, where some systems are now requiring you to have your proper SPF and DMARC records. But if you're not covering all of your domains with SPF and DMARC records, you're leaving your domains open for bad actors to be able to use them for phishing. These are all your brand protection, your domains you might have registered for programs in the past, but you may not be using a lot anymore. So all of your domains have to have an SPF and DMARC record. And it's very simple, SPF minus all, DMARC equal reject, and you're covered. But in every audit that we do for clients, we see, typically 50% of these domains or more just don't have coverage. So they're sitting ducks for bad actors to come in and take those over. And then there's DNSSEC. So DNSSEC is a technology that's been around quite a while to prevent DNS cache poisoning on recursive servers. This is a little bit of a religious discussion. So some people just believe you have to have it in place everywhere. The benefit of having it is that you prevent this DNS cache poisoning because the zone file is signed. There are some drawbacks in that you need to manage it. You need to roll some keys. We've addressed that just by automating those key rolls. But DNSSEC, I believe, will become more important. And when you look at some of the trends of DNS adoption, it's increased pretty radically in the last few years, particularly I find in Europe. So it's something to consider. So those are the top DNS vulnerabilities on your own network. It's really difficult for you to see these unless you've got some sort of a tool that can expose it for you. So what we did with this, we said, well, wouldn't it be interesting to go out and do a sample of the healthcare industry? So we did that. We selected a whole bunch of different companies as a representative sample. And Sean, why don't you walk people through this
For sure.
and take it from there?
Absolutely. So If we can get on to the next slide. I just wanted to talk about our methodology so everybody understands how
Yeah.
we got the study together. So basically, we have access, as do lots of different organizations, to a number of paid and open source feeds for security information and DNS information. So what that allows us to do is kind of do an MDM thing, where if we have one, two, five domains associated with a company, we can find other domains that appear to be owned by that company or are running on the same infrastructure. That lets us get a pretty good idea of what the domain list is for a company, again, without them having to give us any information, which is the same thing that the hackers can do. And then we use passive DNS feeds to populate zone files. So any DNS entries that have been queried, over the last couple of years will get picked up in passive DNS. So it's pretty accurate, and it gives us a great perspective on these companies that we're looking at. So
Yeah.
let's look at the study and the results.
Okay. I forgot to mention at the beginning, if anybody has any questions, just post them in the Q&A and we'll get to those at the end.
Awesome. So what you're looking at here is our DNS inspector dashboard. And this is what we use to run against the benchmark domains and zone files. And this is what our customers use if they're on our platform. It gives you a great overview of your DNS infrastructure, all the registrars that you're using, your managed DNS providers. Very handy to get a list of IP addresses, both for security and DNS reasons, but it's also very helpful in large companies that are spread out all over the place for people to see where exactly things are resolving. And then you have the probes down below that we'll get into in a little bit more detail. So looking at healthcare, when we looked at our HTTPS probe, where the 89% there, you're basically looking at things that are not resolving, which can be a good indicator that you're pointing at some system that you either don't control or you should adjust those entries because they're not being used. And in some cases, you're pointing at internal stuff, but these things need to be examined. And this is a high number based on the different analysis that we've run on a bunch of different industries. In healthcare, this is high.
Yeah, it's really high. We looked at this and said, geez, this can't be right, but it is. And a
Yeah.
lot of these, you mentioned it, some of these may be internal, so we can't necessarily know that, so they need to be reviewed. But it's a big number.
Yep. Okay, redirects. This is a really important one. We always point this out to customers when they get these results. As Peter mentioned, people have pointers all over the place. And in a lot of cases, you'll have a sequence chain of redirects that just happen as your infrastructure sprawls. You'll have a domain that points, to a set of web servers, then redirects from there, then redirects to a load balancer, then redirects to another system. It just happens in the course of business when you've been doing this for multiple years. And if anywhere along that chain, as Peter mentioned, you have an HTTP hop, there's a chance for people to grab your traffic and do an intercept or a man in the middle. This is one of the most frequent things that we find with customers, and it's also one of the most dangerous items.
Yeah.
CNAMEs, very similar to when we were looking at A records. Now we're looking at aliases. Again, we're looking at 35%, which can be considered reasonably high of people having CNAMEs that are pointing to things that it looks like they don't control or they don't resolve. Again, some will be internal, but CNAMEs are especially common because people, when they use third-party services, they plug into all kinds of different companies that help you with software and in various areas to support business. A lot of marketing companies and marketing campaigns will ask you to throw up an alias as part of using their service. The big problem is people stop using those services, as Peter mentioned. Those companies go away. No one ever cleans up the CNAME records, and then the bad guys can come in, set something up, and hijack your traffic. It can be extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
Lame delegations, that's the other one that we always call out. There's been very high profile exposures and hijackings that have taken place with lame delegations. lots of people are sending traffic to shared environments, shared name servers. We found over and over again, companies that have been in business for 10 plus years will have these legacy domains that were set up a long time ago with whatever provider, where at this point, when their services change, they no longer have an SOA record in those name servers. That means that other people who are using those name servers as a shared service can set up that record, and they've got you. They've got full control of that domain. And we all know the various different attack vectors that can stem from that. Again, and then Peter mentioned SPF and DMARC. Top of mind for so many people for deliverability when Yahoo and Gmail started to really enforce people having proper records for SPF and DMARC. So, there is a huge amount of noise. I'm sure a lot of you guys experienced it earlier this year when those things came into place. Just from the business trying to send mail to your legitimate customers and having it get either quarantined or blocked or rejected. But at the same time, to Peter's point, all of these people in healthcare is no different. They don't bother to put an SPF or a DMARC record to reject any mail coming from the brand protection domains. So if your company .x and you've registered company .y, the bad guys will start their social engineering efforts to move through your ranks by sending communications out from these brand protection domains that don't have SPF and DMARC. The other thing to note here is you see the 77. That's important. So the 77 there is error, which means that people have tried to set up SPF, and you'll see the same thing on the DMARC chart. But they've made some kind of a syntax error when setting up those records, which means they think that they have a record in place, but it's actually not doing anything because they've made an error in how they've configured. Yeah, and then DMARC, we already kind of talked about this, but exactly the same thing. And again, you're seeing over 50% of the healthcare domains are unprotected from a DMARC standpoint. And again, we see that there are cases where they have bad syntax on their DMARC entries.
Okay.
And then finally, we have the DNS Sec. Peter mentioned this again, but we are seeing adoption crawling up. DNS Sec is a really good protocol, but the reason people have been reluctant to adopt it, again, to earlier points, was just being able to deal with the keys and key rolling. Unfortunately, if you have DNSSEC and it's not configured properly or you don't roll keys properly, it'll bring you down. So people have been reluctant. But now there's modern systems like ours that automatically handle all these things. So we expect adoption to continue to increase. But as you can see in healthcare, the coverage is pretty much nowhere.
Yeah, and it just occurred to me now. This is healthcare really in North America. I bet if we did this for Europe and particularly Scandinavia, where we see DNSSEC getting adopted, much more widely, we'd see a lot more compliance with this piece.
For sure. So, Peter, I think you're going to do a summary.
Yeah.
But I'll just sum up these results from my perspective. Is that you're looking at an industry in healthcare where we're seeing ransomware attacks on a daily basis. The reaction of these companies is to go and throw this kitchen sink and every dollar they have at closing the actual vulnerabilities that were exploited, but that's usually the last mile. All of these things start with a discovery that usually starts with looking at DNS and the same information that we're finding. So by them closing those end vulnerabilities as they should, and then not going back to clean up their DNS hygiene, it just means those attackers will go back to the starting point and they'll find another avenue and another way in. So, the results speak for themselves to a certain extent, but we're just not seeing companies tackle this. And, we talked about it a little bit earlier, why that always gets deprioritized or it can be a challenge. But that's why, you need help. You need help to get a handle on these things.
Yeah, the DNS is foundational, right? And both Sean and I have worked in organizations where IT guys are just overloaded, infrastructure guy, infosec guys, everybody's overloaded. To go and do a zone review, if especially if it's on a production domain with hundreds or even thousands of records on that domain, you go through and you go, well, I don't know. Should this be live or should this not be live? Is this resolving? Should this not be resolving? So, IT guys, you know how to do that on a per domain basis, but it's really time consuming. You're always ending up with questions and there's no anchor for that. So what we've really tried to do here is just make this easy for, IT, infosec, infrastructure folks, just to be able to say, okay, I see where we're at. And what we see clients doing with this is saying, okay, we see your issues. So this quarter, let's address our SPF and DMARC. Let's get all of that covered by the end of the quarter. Okay, great. This quarter, let's look at all our C names. Are these C names, should they be live? Should they not be live? And even some of those that are live, that are resolving, you might want to look at those again. So the point is to bring visibility here. And the point is also to say, okay, I can discover what my problem is. I can investigate what's going on. I can resolve it. And then we have a function in there that you can simply go in and verify, re-audit, and see if it comes up green. And I think Sean mentioned, I did as well. Everybody has to recognize this is all public. Everybody can see this. So, we know it's an arms race. There are good cops and bad actors. They can go out and do this as well. So they see what we see, and we're just trying to provide a tool for people to be able to manage their own infrastructure. All right, excellent. Thanks, Sean. So, what do you do about this? So we've started to talk to people about, setting this up as a priority for 2025. You need to conduct an audit. You need to understand what your DNS security posture is today. You might not want to know, but you need to know. And it's if you get it in place and you get tools in place, it's actually not that hard to resolve. But essentially, you need to consolidate this to a single pane of glass, whether it's us or someone else, but a single provider that has change controls in place that can review and monitor ongoing to see that, someone hasn't created a vulnerability. I remember talking to a guy that used to work at, I guess I shouldn't say the name, they're a big company. And the guys down in Dev would just set stuff up just to see, does it work? Is this, but they never turn it down. So there are literally, a huge percentage of your DNS records that just should not be live anymore. And those records are providing a roadmap for malicious actors to go and find endpoints that they say, oh, we can get into that endpoint. And then from there, they can traverse or do whatever they plan to do. So the benefits of this is, well, obviously you're going to eliminate some of the DNS vulnerabilities to keep your company and your customers safe. Compliance with frameworks. If you dig in and you look at your frameworks and what you need to sign off on, you don't likely have IT controls in place. You don't have auditability. You don't have change controls. You're just offside in those. Visibility and automation is just makes this easy for teams to get and keep control, and then provide monitoring going forward so that you know that you've maintained the security posture going forward. And the other thing that we found too is when you do this and you centralize and you bring everybody in, or all your assets and network components into one system, you can save quite a bit of money here. It's not just about the vendors that you might be losing in place of another. This is about people time, right? So if you're here, it means you're a DNS person and you've been on those email threads when someone's had a problem and say, well, who controls that domain? Who's got the DNS on that? Where's the login? Where do I log in and see that? This is a constant firefight, and it just drives guys in IT crazy when marketing says, hey, there's something wrong here. Can you guys figure it out? So there's a lot of benefits to make this work for you. You should get it on your roadmap. I guess the next question obviously is, if you're sitting there wondering, what's our DNS security posture? So what we wanted to do today also say, we'll do an audit for you, complimentary, no strings attached. We'll run it for you if you say you want us to do it. We can present you with those results. So if this is something you want to just have a look at to see where do we sit, is this something that we should put into our 2025 roadmap? Shoot us an email to info@authenticweb, use that subject line, and we'll run that audit for you. So with that, everything we do is to help people address security, compliance, and performance. So let me just see here. Did we have, I think we had a couple of questions. Okay, so here's one that did come in. It says, what do you need from us to perform a DNS audit? Sean, you want to take that one?
Yeah, we just need you to say go. As long as we have 1, 2, 5, 10 domains associated with your company, we can use the same methodology to run you an audit. If you want to go to the nth degree and you actually have visibility into all the domains under your company, and you want to provide that list, then we can run against that list and have a higher degree of accuracy, give or take 5%. But if we can just go. You let us know. You let us know what company you're coming from, and we'll get something done, and we'll get you on a call and run you through the results.
Yeah. There was another one here saying, I see DNS inspector can find problems. How do you help fix these problems? I'll take that. So essentially, it depends what you want to do here. So you can take DNS inspector as a standalone and you can use it with your other systems you have in place. What most of our clients do is they use DNS inspector and then they use our DNAM service where we manage the domains and DNS. So that then allows you just to say, oh, I see this record as a problem. It's an insecure redirect or whatever it might be. If it's an insecure redirect, you go to the zone edit, you secure it, and then you're set. So then you can, as I mentioned before, this has helped you to discover it. Then you can investigate in the same system. You can resolve it there, and then you just rerun an audit to be able to fix it. If you're using another tool to manage your DNS, well, you go over to that tool wherever it might be, make the edit, come back to DNS Inspector, and then hit re-audit, and it'll tell you whether it's coming up green or not. Okay. Okay, so there's one more here. So, how do you communicate this to executives in planning for 2025? So that's always challenging, right? So one of the things that I always think about when you're doing annual planning is you've got get two things, right? So one, you're going to save. It's either going to save you money or it's going to make you money when something gets on the priority list. There can also be sort of a method around, well, is this strategic or is this something tactical we can do? But on the save money side, if you get compromised, and remember, you might get compromised and you don't know it's DNS, but DNS really enabled that to happen. But if you get compromised, you've got direct cost related to that, you've got compliance implications, you've got brand damage, and also internally, you've got a firefight that you just don't want to have to deal with. So that costs you money. You can be non-compliant with frameworks that initiates a whole other cycle of going through that. This costs money in terms of people effort to be able to do that. And then, on day to day, you can say to them, well, if we bring everything into one spot where we can manage it all, you're going to save, quite a bit of time as well. So here's another one. What's the best next step after an audit is completed? Is it just to report and review? Yeah. So if we do an audit for you, we'll set up a report. The system will be enabled. We'll just have a call. We'll take 15, 20 minutes. We can review it for you. And then we can also output a summary of that you can share to support a business case to be able to do this or go forward with this. That's a good question. All right. Let's see, anything else? Don't see it? Well, listen, thanks so much for taking time. We know it's busy. It's hard to schedule and attend webinars often, but really, really appreciate everybody showing up and hope you have a great day and, stay secure. Thanks very much, everyone. Have yourself a great day.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks so much.